This particular micro lesson is adapted from one that was taught on my previous practicum experience based on social media, consequences of misuse and its use in the workplace. The initial lesson was intended to cover a 100-minute lesson with more detail in some of the activities and more activities throughout. This lesson was shortened to fit the micro lesson template down to 40 minutes. The overall aim of this lesson was for students to understand that what they post on social media can affect their overall employability, as well as how what they post whilst employed somewhere can affect their prospects of maintaining their employment situation. This lesson was the first lesson I had planned on my last experience and was taken from a teaching block on employees and their rights and responsibilities in the workplace. These activities were chosen to complement the content that was outlined in the unit plan and derived from the Queensland Curriculum Assessment Authority's Essential English Curriculum. The activities in this lesson plan were developed to create a progression of learning by the students from which they were expected to finish the lesson with an understanding of how social media is utilised in the workplace, how its misuse can cause disciplinary action from education organisations and employers. Students were also taught about their digital footprint and how it can affect their future job prospects. The activities were designed in a way to highlight the issues of social media misuse can cause and how it can benefit companies. These activities align with some of the theories on student cognitive development that exist, such as Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. This theory, in short, allows us to understand how the teacher's role can enhance the cognitive development of students through their instruction versus what a student can learn without teacher guidance. So, in lesson element 1, the Venn diagram. In previous practicum experiences, my lessons had to include a literacy lesson starter to introduce the topic and enhance the literacy levels of students. The school that I was at for this practicum didn't require the literacy starter. However, I wanted to introduce the topic in a quick way before exploring the topic at a deeper level. The activity chosen for this section was a Venn diagram activity that was intended to be completed in pairs or a small group, adhering to the small group work teaching strategy. Students were required to discuss as a group as many social media sites as they could think of and categorise them into one of 3 categories. These categories being strictly social, strictly work, or both. This group work activity was designed for students to access their prior knowledge on the topic of social media, what sites they themselves had been exposed to in the past, or utilised themselves. This access of prior knowledge was intended to allow students to generate a link to connect their world with the curriculum. This link was established to connect the content I was preparing to teach to the knowledge of social media and its uses that students already had. From this activity, I had a Socratic discussion amongst the class to ensure that all groups were on the same page with the social media and its uses in the workplace, before moving on to the topics covering the correct use of social media in the workplaces and examples of people losing their jobs over improper use of social media. This discussion was intended to provide the students with some basic levels of knowledge before moving into the inquiry-based activity to ensure that all students were able to successfully engage with the activity and had at least a brief knowledge on how social media can be misused and result in job losses. So, lesson element 2, the source analysis. This lesson segment was implemented to extend on the initial introduction activity in which students were asked to come up with the social media sites and categorise them on their applicability to the workplace. This source analysis activity required students to research examples of people who had lost their jobs through the misuse of social media in either their personal lives or during work hours. In setting this activity, there was some structure implemented to provide the students with a table for analysing the two sources that they came up with. The overall aim of this activity was to get students critically thinking about the sources and teaching them how to assess and extract the important information from a source to justify its message and meaning. This was an instrumental skill for one half of the students' exams at the end of the block of work, in which they were required to answer 2 questions in teal paragraphs relating to a news article on workplace health and safety. This structured inquiry task achieved the goal of recapping or introducing the skills necessary to think critically about the information within a source and encourage students to strive for a deeper meaning from the articles other than what is clearly stated in the title. The option to complete this activity in a pair was tabled to the students, which some of them took up the offer, which allowed them to work together to develop the skills essential to inquiry-based learning, whilst also developing skills related to small group work, such as clear communication with peers and cooperation with members of the team to ensure their goal is met. From the inquiry-based and somewhat small group work source analysis, students were asked to share their findings from at least one of their articles with the rest of the class. This was intended to help establish a classroom environment where students can share their thoughts and opinions freely. This is an essential system to implement in the classroom as an environment where students can speak their opinions in supportive and encouraging the students to challenge themselves and others in the classroom. From here, the next activity in the full-length lesson was a discussion on digital footprints and how students can manage their digital footprint, as well as an inquiry activity into the students' own digital footprints by googling their own name and seeing what they could find. So for this micro lesson, the third element was a Socratic discussion and as a recap activity. So from here, the final lesson element was a full class discussion on the content of the lesson as a reflection of how the lesson went. The choice of format for this recap was a hard decision, as in past experiences I've utilised exit cards as a recap activity to gauge the students' understanding, whereas the discussion was a new entity to tackle. This element was chosen due to the idea behind using discussion as a teaching strategy, as it is said that students benefit from classroom discussion, as discussions encourage students to develop their understanding by drawing on their prior knowledge and experience, thinking critically about the subject, and developing their skills of analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. This activity was designed to create discussion amongst the class and enable students to table their opinions on different aspects of the lesson and its content, whilst recapping what was learned and how it relates to the outside world instead of just a classroom context. So, in conclusion, overall, from my self-critique and the peer review of this micro lesson, there are few areas that I believe need improvement, as this lesson balances 3 different teaching styles that enable students with different learning styles to be engaged in the learning, as well as the teaching styles complementing each other well. In this lesson, I initially made a conscious effort to balance the overall lesson to include teaching strategies such as direct instruction, small group work, discussion, and inquiry. I believe these complement one another due to the ability for overlapping in skills and processes undertaken in each of these teaching strategies. The other focus in this lesson was influencing the students' zone of proximal development and enabling students to reach their maximum potential from the lesson and apply some of the skills to their future studies and their life outside of the classroom.